really took its time to start streaming there. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I always got to give it a little bit of talk here at the beginning because YouTube is a little slow, and I'm just going to use that for the VOD because I'm desperately, desperately lazy. Anyone who knows me knows that, though. This counts as a stream for the day, I think. I feel like it does. We're going to be doing a Fallout 4 review. Looks like things are live, so I feel pretty comfortable going ahead now. Going to be reviewing Fallout 4. I finished playing it yesterday, a couple of days ago. I more or less finished playing it. I finished the core story and pretty much as many of the side quests as availed themselves to me in sort of what I will call a quest-driven playthrough of the game. I did a little bit of everything. And I spent enough time to know how things work and how interested I was going to be in them. But I wasn't like, oh, let me play this like Minecraft and build a bunch of stuff. But, we'll just call that the caveat for the review. If you want to completely write off everything I have to say about the game at large, because I didn't play it the way you would have played it, feel free to do so. Also, there will be spoilers throughout the entire thing. So if you don't want to find out stuff that happens in, honestly, at this point, only partially story-driven game, then you should check out now or check out during the story portion. But there will probably be some spoilers before that because I just need to be spoilerable. Yeah, good start. Good start. I feel like it's a good start. Minute and a half of just wasted time talking about nothing. So. It's going to be the same format as my other reviews. In case you don't watch any of those or haven't watched any of them yet, it's going to be graphics, gameplay, story, and then I'll go over my conclusions of what I thought about the game once I'm done talking about those. I find that that's just sort of the easiest way to chop it up for me to make notes. It gives me a little bit of direction, and I'm not a very... I forget stuff. I used to be good at remembering stuff, but now not so much. So let's jump into it. The graphics. This is one of those things that I've seen a couple of people talk about, and people are generally pretty happy with the graphics, which, at least on the PC version. And that's one of those things that's a little bit weird to me, because I found that the graphics were sort of mediocre even by modern standards. I think there are a lot of games out there where if you had released this game from a different studio, the graphics and a lot of things we'll get into wouldn't have necessarily passed muster. I'd say they're just okay enough to sort of keep people from questioning things. It's sort of this thing where everybody kind of is just okay with it, I think, because it's a Fallout game. Oh, look, they added specularity maps. Oh, look, there's... now textures seem to get wet because they managed to figure out how to dim them down a little bit with what approaches on a semi-modern lighting engine. But even then, it's not the best lighting engine to be found anywhere around. So it's a weird thing. Like I said, it's just okay enough that I think most people, especially fans of the game, aren't necessarily going to be upset by it. But it's not particularly great. It's really middle ground. It wouldn't surprise me at all to find out that the bulk of the work on this had been done last gen and that they just kind of poked some other things in there without really doing a whole lot of optimizing, which is desperately obvious once you start playing the game, because they had to. They moved from PS3 to PS4 or whatever the jump happened to be, and so they said, okay, well, we need to get some better lighting in there, we need to get something in there, and even then you're looking at a game which on console drops to 15 frames per second on PS4 when you scope. That's an unacceptable sort of drop. You've got, even on my rig is a pretty decent rig. What is it, a 4970K, something like that. I can't remember the numbers of my processor, but it's basically the highest end Z97 chipset processor. I've got a GTX 970 video card and 32 gigs of RAM. There really shouldn't be much that I'm running out of in the way of horsepower in a game that's just sort of been barely upgraded visually. Certainly there are more polygons on screen at any given time than there were in Skyrim, depending on how you modded it, but Skyrim felt pretty tight as far as engine optimization goes, and here it looks like the stuff that they've added in wasn't really given time to breathe and time to be done down, which is A little bit frustrating, I gotta say. Like I said, they basically added specularity and some other stuff, but still, even on a beast of a machine in the middle of Boston, in the city parts, there are serious drops down to close to 30 frames per second from my usual peg to 60 around the rest of the world. Of course, when there's nothing blowing up, at which points it might drop down into the low 50s. But again, that's just not really something that should happen given the visual fidelity that we're talking about here, which isn't particularly high. The models aren't really crazy high quality. They look pretty good, but they're nothing to really write home about considering the current crop of video games and the quality that we're getting out of, models in those. Um, one other thing I was going to mention. Oh, right. One of the things that had been blamed for the frame rate drops in Boston proper was that there was an entirely secondary ground underneath the initial ground of the city, which is weird. I've played through again the core storyline. I didn't see anything that suggested that might have been sort of a end game, oh, we actually blow up Boston and this is what's left of it after the fact kind of thing. It didn't seem to be a situation where, because in the beginning of the game, you're fairly well constrained to the main area, right? Boston is far off in the distance, and you start off in Sanctuary. You don't really have anywhere to run, and if you wait around for too long, everything blows up. The bombs drop anyway, and you just die outside of the vault. So there's a second ground and rivers and things like that occur underneath the original one, but not at such a depth that you would suspect that there is a tunnel leading into them that I just haven't found. They're very close to the surface, and probably part of the reason they're not being culled properly by the engine, because they are very, very close to being rendered, and possibly they're just not, the engine's not sure whether they're supposed to be occlusion culled or not. It's one of those things that a patch would fix fairly briskly. Just pulling that out entirely, honestly, a mod could pull that out fairly easily, as long as it's nothing that really needs to be planted in the scene for whatever purpose. Worst possible case, I imagine NVIDIA could write a game-specific hack that would, increase the occlusion culling. I very much doubt that's going to happen, but whatever. It doesn't really matter. Aside from overall looks, I'm going to lump this in with graphics. Is the game is just utterly undynamic. It is very much a lazy extension of the Gamebryo engine, far beyond its intended uses. We've literally, it's like having ancient technology on another planet that we're still using because we're just too lazy to do the work to bring it into the current era, and that seems to be the takeaway from it. The physics engine is largely frozen in time. You're seeing the same videos of people plopping watermelons everywhere. I mean, Donkey just did a video where he puts 1,000 watermelons everywhere, and it's like, I've seen this. I've seen this in Skyrim. I've seen 800 of this video already. It just happened to take place in a world with dragons instead of a world with snarky reporters. It's not an advancement. Thank you. The physics engine is the same. Nothing really breaks down, nothing falls apart. We're not approaching anything that Fallout could really use, and that's sort of a dynamic wasteland, a wasteland where you can actually bring change onto things. They sort of try to approach it through the ability to build out camps and the like, but you can't really. You can delete certain picked things, cars and some destroyed houses and things like that, but they're largely just removing a prop from the playfield, not even multiple props in a lot of cases. A lot of the houses are literally just a single demolished house prop that you recycle into wood and steel, and it doesn't feel particularly satisfying. It just, I don't know, again, it's so undynamic, and that's really the thing that I want to start seeing. We've seen beautiful, high quality characters and set pieces and things like Until Dawn and The Order 1886. We've seen the power that you can push out of a fixed environment. We've seen better lighting. There's a mod actually to enable shadowing from your Pip-Boy light and headlamps that you can wear, which is insane that wasn't already in there. Like, you just literally, it's turning on a cast shadow flag for those lights. Presumably they were turned off in the interest of either making the PC version of the game look more like the PS4 and Xbox One, version of the games, or it was just turned off and they forgot to turn it back on for the PC because it took a little bit too much horsepower, or because the game just wasn't quite optimized enough. And honestly, some of the shadows kind of looked like shit even when you turn that on. So it's not really the greatest thing in the world, but it really would have gone a long way to adding a little bit of atmosphere, especially to the darker areas of the game. They left it off, whatever. But otherwise, you're left with static environments that you walk through. You pick up your static physics model props in a completely uninteresting kind of way. We didn't even bother to go with the physics pickup button that has been in every single Gamebryo game. We didn't even bother to actually animate the character grabbing something and picking it up. You literally just float a trash can in front of your character and then put it on top of somebody's head. It's amusing the first 10 times you do it, but I've put buckets on heads in Skyrim. Nothing is walked forward here from sort of a graphics or engine point of view. Some of the more distracting things, they're very slow to load in high LOD models in more than a few situations. It's an open world game. This is not an advancement of the form. And slow load in on high LOD stuff has been a serious problem. It still does load in eventually as it does enough logic calls and realizes that, hey, you're actually close to this person. Usually it'll happen if you move toward or away from the person, which will cause it to re-query whether it needs to do a low LOD or high LOD model. So it's usually fairly easily fixed, but it's just something that at this point shouldn't be the case. If we're going to judge the engine by the fact that it is one of the most mature engines still in constant use in a modern game, like, it's serious, it dates back a very, very long way, then we should be holding it to at least a higher standard of technical prowess. But there were still tons of crashes on Windows 10. There are still LOD problems. There are still lighting problems. There are still the same weird physics problems that have always been there in the Gamebryo engine. And it's an admirable engine. It has put out some of the best games around. Sadly, it is showing its age very, very much so. A new, specularity maps don't really help a sort of, mediocre, not really dynamic lighting engine, whatever. It doesn't get there nearly enough. The good on the graphics is, the animation in some places is a little bit better. Specifically, the motion captured stuff, the obviously motion captured stuff on people like Piper and other companion characters is a little bit more well done. She's got to be probably the most animated person in the game. A lot of other people still just kind of stand around. She's the only one that really has some sort of flair to her, and clearly somebody cared about Piper as a character because a lot of work was put into her, and that's great. But yeah, it just ends up feeling old. But in some spots there are these nice little moments of quality that feel really pretty good, and then in other spots it ends up sort of feeling like, I'll get to it, don't worry about it. It just the good people that belong to a better game. Piper should have been in a better game, and that's sort of the saddest part. She's a great character. I could have had that in my conclusion. It would have been all touching and interesting, but fuck it. There it is right there. There's more color this time around, which is a fantastic departure. There seemed to almost be, in places, an objective effort to force color into the game. A lot of the high-rises around Boston are just sort of weirdly shaped and don't make a whole lot of sense to have existed in that sort of time period. They look more modern or futurist sort of design, and there's sort of an unnecessary amount of color plastered onto those, but they do, for what it's worth, put in some greens to go with the browns. It looks a lot better color wise than Fallout 3 or New Vegas ever did, and that's to some extent a saving grace. You still don't get a lot of color variation as far as the clothing goes. You get your vault suit, which is a nice bright blue. You can see it right there in this pilfered screenshot that I found somewhere on the internet, and you get some nice reds, but red is brown. But with more red in it. So there's more color this time around, which is fantastic, but there's still not a lot of color. I could have done with a little bit more. I feel like people have probably 200 years after, nukes got dropped, figured out how to, if not make new clothes, at least wash the clothes that they have, so not everybody needs to be covered with dirt all the time. But what are you going to do? There's not really a whole lot. There's really nothing you can do. So that's pretty much it for graphics. I probably was, I guess, a little angry about the graphics, but it could have been better. There was a lot that needed to be done on the engine side, on the sort of technical side, that I feel like could have been there, especially with the time that they had to put the game out. But, I guess they didn't get the right people working on it, or they didn't focus on the right stuff. And that's weird for reasons that will become apparent as I move forward in this review. The gameplay, I guess we can go ahead and I'll sort of front load that, shoot the good stuff. The best thing that I can think of at the moment is that shooting is far better. It feels good. You don't feel super clunky. Some things shoot very, very slow. Revolvers especially that don't need to. And there seems to be a lot of charge up time, which is one of the problems I ran into. Damage feels extremely underwhelming, especially on higher difficulties. You end up with some guns towards the end of the game. I had the fully modded Destroyer or Disposer or something. It's one of those guns that you get given by, I think, one of the railroad people. That I ended up modding all to hell, and it honestly did a great amount of damage throughout the bulk of the game. But the damage feels a little underwhelming considering how many weapons have charge-up times. The new laser pistol, the crank laser rifles, I wanted to love those. They seem super cool. They're like, oh, look, a laser alternative to a bolt-action rifle. This is great. But they just ended up being kind of too slow in the long run for most of the fights, especially if you run into ghouls, because ghouls are going to run at you at high speed, and you can't exactly be reloading by cranking something 3 or 4 times. And, there are a couple other things that really long charge-up times that end up doing 40 damage, which seems great at the time, but as you move through the game, those numbers just don't really matter once you start fighting, if you start fighting the Brotherhood, start fighting Brotherhood Knights, or if you run into a Deathclaw or things like that. Deathclaws are supposed to be scary, so fair enough there. But you feel like you're way sort of outgunned, because unless you're in the power armor, you're pretty floppy all the time. And that's sort of another thing. They give you power armor. They want you to wear power armor. They are throwing power armor at you. They are like, look, it's a caricature of Fallout. Have the power armor. Wear it. Be a power armor guy. I don't want to wear power armor. I don't care. I have like 60 fusion cores. If you guys want them, I'll sell them to you. 50 caps each. But I don't want to be in power armor. I want to look at my character every time I'm in a cutscene. I like the little voice thing it does, kind of, but I just don't want to do it. I can't wear parts of power armor. I had this cool idea about a third of the way through the game. I was like, I'm going to throw my character into power armor legs. I'm going to put on like leg power armor. That'll give me a nice like boost of armor, kind of in general. Obviously, you'd still do sort of box-based armor on your arms, heads, chest, and legs. But I couldn't, It's all or nothing on the power armor, and I was a little disappointed by that. But that's a side thing. I didn't have that written down before. This one actually was one that really kind of bothered me, even though I tend to do a heroic playthrough. Anti-hero gameplay is pretty much the best you can do. You can't be mean to people. In a lot of cases, you can't say no. And if you do say no, nothing happens in a lot of cases. Like, the factions are sort of set, and that's partially a story thing, so I'll cover that more as we roll through gameplay and into story. But if, say, one of the first people you meet up with, they're the Minutemen, you can say, no, I don't really want to help you. And then the guy yells at you, and then you walk off, but it doesn't change anything. You just... The thing, you can't do anything. It doesn't like you. And I'm sure at some point you could just go back and re-pick that up. You can't join the Raiders. You can't do anything. It's just faceless Raiders fighting against the Minutemen, and you're supposed to help them, and because that's how they're introducing you to the power armor. And then there's a Death Claw because that's cute, right? That's fun. And it's the same problem rolling forward. You don't really run into any outright evil factions. It's kind of a problem. Most of the quests aren't even remotely evil. There's a couple where you kind of help some people. There's a jet dealer, and even the jet dealer's like, my brother's on the stuff, and I wish I could get him on the stuff. There's some people in Vault 114 that have kind of some sinister stuff going on, and you can sell that guy drugs, but that's about the closest you can get to anything. And I didn't do it because, again, I tend to do fairly heroic playthroughs. I like being a hero guy. I find it very hard to be evil in these games. At best, I tend to be, fairly anti-authority. But again, that wasn't really a problem. There was a sort of lack of depth there, and that's going to be a theme running through the entire thing. Modding the weapons is fun, but it shows itself to be fairly shallow fairly quickly, and that is something that bothered me. You've basically got a couple of different stocks for long guns. Those don't change really across the different sorts of guns. You got a couple different kinds of barrels and then different receivers. And while it might superficially seem like that's going to provide you with a lot that you can do as far as modding things out, it really doesn't. It amounts to 5 or 6 different options at the most across different classes of guns. There aren't that many classes of guns, and really it just, it kind of ended up being one of those things where I go, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of avoid picking up extra guns because even though I can break them down into the constituent parts, they're heavy and there's not a lot of reason to do it. So I'd pick out a gun, I'd use it once or twice, I'd say, this doesn't feel really good, and away it went forever, and I never picked up another gun of its type, which meant really towards the end of the game I was modding 3 or 4 guns across the entire game because those are the ones that I actually cared about. When I first started out, I was kind of modding everything I picked up, and as I rolled through about 5 or 6 guns, I realized, wait, these are the guns. This is it. There's a couple extra little hidden ones here and there, little hidden gun types, but that was about it. And it ends up feeling kind of shallow. It was this thing that was a lot of promised depth, and they even made it a point in one of the trailers to go, look at how much you can edit stuff. Look, it's amazing. Welcome to fun time. It's build your own Fallout. It's not. There's 6 guns, and you can put different pieces on them. And I get that's technically modding the gun, but really it's an upgrade system disguised as a modding system. You're not modding anything. You're not putting together interesting sorts of guns. You're building the best one. As for instance, the stock not only affects stability and range, in some cases, I want to say it affects damage as well, I guess because you can't hold it right. But why am I going to want a gun just because it looks funny that I have a pistol grip on what's essentially a rifle? It's not good. It doesn't do anything for me. It just makes my gun worse. So it's an upgrade system masquerading as a modding system, and really you're going to take the guns that you've got and then just run them down to whatever's at the bottom of the list because far and away that is the most powerful thing. No thought was given to making mods a trade-off, and again, it shows itself as fairly shallow fairly quickly. I know I'm repeating myself, but that's what it does. It just kind of exposes itself as a modding thing that's really just hidden gun upgrades that you have to pay for rather than finding them around or buying them from somebody for caps or whatever, which just makes it your responsibility to find your own gun pieces. So, there you go. Building camps was clearly a heavy feature that they very much intended for you to play with a whole lot. That basically, to me, meant that the other housing was a bit lackluster. You get home plate in Diamond City, and you get your dad's thing, or not your dad's, your son's thing when you go to the Institute after he dies. So, it's, I don't know, just again, like I said, the word shallow comes to mind. So you've got these houses that are kind of crap that you have to clean up. It's not like in Skyrim where you could, have your house outfitted with stuff. And I guess you get a room in Vault 81 as well. I didn't get that one. Did I get that one? I don't remember. You get a couple of rooms. I found them fairly lackluster. They're okay. It's not like the Skyrim thing where you can have them outfitted with nice stuff and then obviously steal all the nice stuff and scrap it for parts. It's more of a, you get a house and then you do build your own thing. For some people that may be very, very rewarding and very, very engaging. I like playing decorate house, but I also was, especially on my first playthrough, again, a year from now, not even 6 months from now, I'll probably crack the game open again and play it in a different way. But as it was presented to me, there's no real reward for camp building. There's a little bit of reward for sort of, decorating your house. That's fun. I can have a little bit of fun decorating my own house. That's great. So the fact that they do give you some housing is fantastic, but I would have liked the ability to build sort of more and varied stuff. I feel like I got a decent amount of, the sort of special side bits. There weren't a whole lot of them, but, the furniture on offer is all kind of crap, and I feel like I should really be able to get better stuff. But beyond that, the sort of shallowness, especially to the camp building itself, to step away from house decorating and into the camp building proper, that's where it really becomes a problem. There's no reward for me to do that. There is no benefit if I choose to lead the Minutemen. That's basically who sends you around capturing territory, and that's one of the reasons why you're forced to help these literally lawful good people, because they tell you to go where to go and what to do and where to build your shit, and they help you expand your quote-unquote territory. And they give you places to go and build. But once you go there and do a quest for those people, it very quickly turns those into repeating quests. It never lets you sort of abandon those repeating quests unless, and this is serious, you turn in a quest and run away very, very quickly before he says, I have something else for you to do. And if you do like me and make the mistake of either tuning to the Minutemen radio station or going to the castle after you've fixed up the radio station, you will be given quests en masse by overhearing them from the radio broadcast. It is not fun. I do not consider that a gameplay element. It was actually kind of annoying, and now they're in my quest list forever because I have no intention of doing them. But beyond there being no reward to camp building, that is to say, building up forces never helps you in any way, at least in the direction that I took the game. It might help you if you make some different choices. But I have a camp that apparently I'm own or I'm friendly with, and the people there are 30% happy, and there's 4 of them, and I don't know why there's 4 of them, but there could be more if I built, houses and beds and things, but that doesn't benefit me at all. It just costs me resources and caps and time that I don't care to put in, because these people are literally cookie cutter NPCs that they just stand there. They don't do anything. There's no benefit to helping them. There is no quest system to even make me want to do it. No one gives you a quest and says, hey, go build a room, because they couldn't figure out how to detect whether or not you built a room. There's no reward. There's no tutorial system. It's literally just, here's a sandbox of Lego pieces that you can stick together. No guidance, no benefit, no reward for doing any of this crap. Maybe you get a little something if you get it ranked up high enough. Maybe if you rank a settlement up high enough, it gives you a little bonus perk, but I didn't see it. I looked on a couple of wikis to see if there was anything related to the building, and I couldn't find anything. Admittedly, the wikis are very, very spare as far as information goes at the moment, but nobody tells me what to do. Nobody asks me to help them. Nobody says, hey, could you plant some plants? I mean, there's stuff that they could have put quests in for. Hey, our camp needs water. I think that's the one quest you get when you first do the Minutemen stuff, and you go and build a water thing for those guys, and you get a water thing, and then you have to build a radio tower. And there's a couple of radio tower building things, but there's never like a follow-up, go to this camp and improve it, which would have been a fairly easy step-up system to get me to actually give a shit about the crafting. Hey, we need more beds over here, or things aren't going that well in this place, because they do track a number of things. They track the number of items you use, how much food, water, electricity, what the defense level is. There could have been one that was just, these guys got attacked by raiders, they managed to fend them off, but we need you to go there and build some fortifications. And maybe the reason for this is that they didn't want to get in your way. and say, hey, you're going to have to go and spend your resources doing this. But, again, like, well, what's it there for if you're not going to ask me to go spend my resources helping out? That's part of the reason that, again, I was doing sort of an anti-hero playthrough. That's kind of how I play. I'm anti-authority, but I also like to ask people for extra money if they look like they've got it. It's not exactly an evil guy playthrough, and I'm not upset by that. I just feel like, okay, but give me a reason to build you a house or a bed, or just tell me, just give me a little quest. Give me a gameplay element that ties this together in any way. And again, I played it with an eye firmly towards quest progression, and that made it feel, I don't know, a bit short and unsatisfying. I'm sure there are people that have already put in 100+ hours into this game, just building shit up, and I've seen them. I've seen people talk about taking 7 hours just to make a lit up sign. And that's great, but I want a natural progression that sort of ties all of it together. I want the gameplay tied in to the quest system. I don't just want to be able to Minecraft myself a house. I don't need it. I don't want it. I'm playing for the story, largely. But give me a reason that's story related, and I'll dive right the fuck into it, and I'll spend more time than I need to getting it perfect. As it was, I just had to make up a little story for myself about why I was helping these people do this. I was like, I'm going to build them a nice little bunker to be safe in, because these houses aren't very nice. And nonetheless, it doesn't really matter if you do that, because they stand around in fucking sanctuary hammering on the same house for the better part of the entire game. I don't think they ever stop doing it. But, what am I going to do? Where was I? I had a list. There we go. Quests. And I'm calling this a gameplay problem rather than a story problem. Quests were not made obvious or sent my way nearly often enough. I'm kind of used to Skyrim, where you can accidentally pick up like 3 quests because they sent you somewhere intelligent, and while you're in that cave, you can kill something, and once you loot the guy, he has a letter on him that starts a quest. That happens in Skyrim, it happens in New Vegas, it happens in Fallout 3. I don't remember it happening as an extra quest more than maybe once in Fallout 4. And again, I know there's a lot of stuff I might have missed, but I mean, in Skyrim, I got couriers running up to me. In Fallout New Vegas, when I enter a city, I got a dude running up to me going, hey, you're that guy. I heard about you. You can't even come around here no more. Hey, whoa. Where was that in Fallout 4? The best you get is once you join the railroad, some prick will run up to you and say a one-off line. He'll either say, somebody wants to see you, who is literally across the room, or he'll just spout a random line like, Deacon's record is the best in the whole railroad, which I don't care about. There's no random couriers. There's very few pick 'em up quests. There are a couple of walk by it or hear it on the radio quests that are unrelated to faction business, which is one of the most boring factions ever. It's the Minutemen, who are just needy, worthless, give nothing back faction. You're almost immediately named the general after doing 2 fucking things, and then you're in charge, and there you go. Probably a story problem, but again, the quests were not handed to me. I was not directed to places where the quests were nearly often enough. I did a whole lot of walking around the Boston wasteland, and not nearly often enough. I wasn't even doing it. I think I was just fucking around in the woods, taking shots at people at an encampment that had nothing to do with any of the quests I was on, when somebody happened by me, and they didn't even give me a quest. They were just like wandering drug dealers, which is weird. And they didn't even give me a quest. It was like a whole fucking, I was like, oh good, I got some quests I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go help these guys be villainous or something. This will be fun. Nothing. They just said, oh, my brother's trying to kick the habit, or whatever the fuck it was about. I don't know if we could trust him no more. And then they kept walking. And I'm just like, well, who the fuck am I supposed to... And they seemed to know who I am. They were like, good to see you again. And I was like, I've literally never seen you the entire game. I have no idea who you are. And they offered to sell me drugs. And that, I've had that experience in real life a couple times, but in Fallout 4, didn't have quite the same terrifying charm, especially because they didn't give me a quest. Um, in real life, I turned down the quest, take drugs from a random stranger in a parking lot. Um, the gameplay, this one sort of ties back into the camp building and just sort of need to grab up everything that you see. Encumbrance is now a very, very serious issue, to the point that I imagine that people who really want to play the game without thinking too hard about what it is that they're doing and how much stuff they're picking up will probably just go ahead and hit the old command console and type in, a hack to force their carry weight up to something unreasonable so they can carry as much stuff as they want. Because really, you're supposed to pick up a lot of stuff, a lot of things, take up a lot of weight. You really, you're going to want to keep a fairly minimal contingent of guns and armor, which if you like playing dress up or switching things out, really leads to a lot of thinking, or it leads to a lot of trips back to your sort of areas to drop stuff off. They do make dropping stuff off fairly easy, but again, if you're out for in a particularly long time, encumbrance will become a very serious problem for you. If you're like me and your main objective was to follow quest progression without really being interrupted, and if I happened to see a weapon stand, I wanted to pick something up, then the encumbrance becomes pretty annoying fairly quickly. Another thing that I ended up I guess missing out on entirely. I didn't really run into that many dudes that try to have sex with me, but I don't think I ever once encountered the ability to use my Black Widow talent. Black Widow talent being the one where you can intimidate men. I guess that's what they changed it to. They changed it to just, it's now easier to intimidate men of the opposite sex, or members of the opposite sex. And they entirely got rid of the Femme Fatale perk, which allowed you to do the same to females. Of course, my charisma was at 10, so I think I was predestined. If I looked through the things, and basically your checks are 3, 5, and 7, I think, for easy, medium, and hard ones. On whatever the check is for intimidation, it's 3, 5, and 7. So if you're above those, I think you pretty much hit all of those. There's no, speech 60. The modifiers have become fairly simple. And honestly, that was a little frustrating as well. But again, I never ran into an opportunity to use my Black Widow talent as far as getting an extra dialogue option, which is something that I will be discussing at length in the story segment of this review. But I found that very frustrating. Like, at no point did it ever go, hey, here's a special choice because of one of your perks. Here's a special dialogue option. It said that there would be extra dialogue options, but I think they may have just been replaced because they went with the 4-direction talk wheel, which was a terrible idea. I think once in the game I remember it being you could see more options, and that's when you're picking your railroad call sign. Whatever. But yeah, the lack of the lesbian version of that really hits my gameplay pretty hard, because my whole deal is to be a big dykey lesbo walking around trying to dive as much muff as I can and flirt with literally any woman that'll talk to me. So you can't hit on random women, even though the game's relationship system is incredibly loose about the whole thing, which is, kind of nice. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's very frustrating because, again, that's one of the ways, that's one of the things I always made sure to max out in things like New Vegas and 3 and Skyrim and anywhere basically that they'd allow me to do it. I try to get my speech up really high because that's how I prefer to deal with things in the game. It's more fun that way. I like to talk to people and say, see what options they give me and do things that way. So Fallout 4 was a big disappointment for me in that field, but I find it really weird that a lot of that stuff got pulled out, and I never really saw my Black Widow talent come out, but I didn't really hit on a lot of dudes because I just don't. It's not the kind of character I'm playing, so it was a little bit frustrating. It's sort of gameplay, sort of storyline, though, to talk about the relationship system a bit. I like that the relationship system is very loose. If you haven't already, people have been talking about it, and it kind of, honestly, they've been really blowing it out of proportion. They're like, oh, it's polysexual polyamory. It's beautiful. It's like a Tumblr wet dream. And I'm just kind of like, okay, that's great. I don't actually care that you guys think that this is a giant step forward for multi-erotic, rights in America or something. It's literally just, they made the game and they didn't actually care who you get with. But basically, the long and short of it is you can get with multiple people. So for me, that becomes very, very convenient because everybody's bisexual, which I think is how they did it in Skyrim as well, or they're sex non-discriminatory, however you want to say it. But yeah, not for the bullshit Tumblr reasons, but I was very happy about this because it allowed me to basically, and I haven't finished it yet. I'm working Kate now, but I did Piper already. And I had sex with that lady who sings the song, who I think the song's in the basement in Good Neighbor. She's like 80 years old, but that's fine. You know what I mean? If you can get it lubed enough. But anyway, yeah, it basically means I can romance two people on a single playthrough. I don't have to go back and do a completely different playthrough like I'd have to in a BioWare game, say if I wanted to bone the Indian chick or Liara in Mass Effect 3, which is nice. So, yeah, I like that the relationship system is open, and that's one of the good things, and the shooting is better. The rest of it, there's a lot of, it plays exactly like New Vegas pretty much beyond that. So, plus all my complaints. So I'm a positive guy. I'm sorry, Fallout 4. I wanted to love you, and that's why it was such a sort of depressing thing. I came in and I didn't hate it. I still have fun playing the game, and I'll probably actually kick it open right after this. Either that or StarCraft 2. But it just hasn't quite got there. So let's get into the story. Let's get into the story just a little bit. As a disclaimer, going into the story thing, obviously I've already spoiled a couple times, so I'm not really worried about that. As a disclaimer, the terrible dialogue wheel is going to feature heavily as sort of the underpinning reason for a lot of my complaints about the story. It is a decision that Bethesda made. It has ruined the story portion of the game as far as I'm concerned. There are already mods out so that you can remove the terrible choice dialogue wheel, but that does not change the underlining fact that there will only be 4 options for any given playthrough, and there's nothing that can be done about that unless people want to go in and voice the entire thing themselves. I imagine that might get rolled back. I don't know. It's awful. I don't like it. But yeah, so that's the underpinning for this entire story section. The dialogue wheel is terrible and has ruined the game from a story perspective. To start off with, I'll just throw this out there. The main characters, and really pretty much every companion you run into are fairly poorly developed with not a whole lot of real backstory. Piper is pretty much the most well fleshed out, but especially the core characters, the sole survivor, the person that you play, and your family are very, very poorly thought out, very poorly sort of realized in the Fallout kind of way. So I have no backstory, but hey, I've got a happy home and a husband because I was straight before I got frozen for 60 years, and then everything changed. The problem is the child and the husband are used as a very cheap, very shallow emotional anchor for the entire story. I'm supposed to be upset about that, and the game tells you as much by only really giving you options where you're upset about it. Even if you pick the most sort of blasé option about anything that you're going to say about your husband or your stupid kidnapped ugly kid but you'll still be whiny about it. Like you're still upset. You're not blasé at all. So even though you're trying to brush it off and be like, it's nothing, don't worry about it, you're still like, it's nothing, just don't worry about it. It's like that. It's kind of honestly annoying. And for me, it really ruined the entire main story arc. The entire premise of the game is that you're chasing after your kid who's been kidnapped. You can sort of use the dialogue wheel to say, oh, well, I wanted vengeance because they killed my husband. You can sort of drive it that way every now and again, but there will be dozens of times easily where they force you to make it about your kid. I hate children. Just utterly ineffective. Did not work. It's like a Pokemon water type against the ground electricity guy. It just doesn't work. I wasn't into it. There is largely throughout the story no real option to split off and do your own thing as well. Obviously the sort of main storyline curls through things, but Just like in the situation with the Minutemen early on in the game, I can't really make my own decisions. All of the Minutemen characters are marked as essential, which means that you can't kill them. You can wound them and certainly make them angry at you. But, they're essential and they're a core part of how they force you into doing the camp system. So it's one of those things that you can't change. And that repeats itself on and on throughout the story. Factions, in stark contrast to the other games, are largely self-contained. They don't really comment about things that you do that don't pertain directly to them. Every now and again, you'll just have somebody sort of out of nowhere, if you've done a couple of Brotherhood quests, be like, I know about your time with the Brotherhood, and I thought you might be a little upset when we asked you to go do this thing that, is not okay with the Brotherhood. And it's just like, you haven't even mentioned them until now. Like that wasn't even a part of it. In fact, in one of the groups that said, we know you have weird allegiances with the Brotherhood, they don't really care because they're kind of like, they brought it up as a good thing when I joined the group. It's just kind of, like I said, it's weird. It doesn't quite fit together in the way that it should. There's not a lot of interplay, and a large part of that is that they've gotten rid of the karma system. This is something that is largely unforgivable. It pulls context and depth directly out of the faction systems. The karma system and the faction love-hate system is largely, it seems to be binary. I multiple times just killed random Brotherhood agents, and I didn't have any pop-ups that alerted me that I had lost, karma with the Brotherhood, or that I had lost, reputation with the Brotherhood. I killed several of them just for kicks because they were around, and some guys I was standing next to happened to also be shooting that direction, so I killed them. It's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating, to say the least. And beyond that, you end up with just a very sort of bland array of characters. The Brotherhood is the most well-developed of the factions for obvious reasons. They play a very large part in the story. They're one of the large, pretty set pieces that was supposed to make everybody super impressed, but their backstory's built in. If you played the other Fallout games, you don't have to worry about it. Their lore is established. The Children of the Atom are also reasonably well established in the lore, but in the game, they give you very little reason to go and interact with them, and they're just not really rewarding if you pursue it. It's not that sort of funny, weird, quirky Children of the Atom kind of thing that you'd like to see. You can just kind of go that direction with it and whatever. I didn't have Piper with me at the time for some reason. Oh, right, maybe because she just couldn't go. I don't know. But yeah, the Children of Atom are kind of boring and bland, and I didn't really spend a lot of time around them. There are no real raider factions. They're the Gunners, I guess, if you want to call them a raider faction, but they also seem to be kind of not really raiders exactly. Like, they're kind of just their own little faction off to the side. It's certainly not anything in the idea of the Great Khans and the other one, who the Boomers from the other one, who are very much a core part of the game, like these very specific raiders. In Fallout 4, it's just, raiders came by. These raiders came by and took my stuff. There's no raiders. It's just guys. It's just a bunch of guys raiding. It doesn't really have anything to do with the story. There's no depth to it. You certainly can't go join the raiders. I mean, you could become the head of the Great Khans, I think, in New Vegas. I can't remember. But you can definitely do some stuff with the Boomers. And there's a lot of interesting sort of little, subplot stuff where these guys aren't necessarily angry at you from the jump. A lot of what you run into as well are just these weird little stupid one-offs that honestly are kind of wounded by the fact that there is no karma system and that there is no faction reputation system really at play in a meaningful way. You have the Atom Cats who give you a paint job. You have the Pillars of the Community who basically look for any reason to get mad at you. Basically, you walk in and then you're taken up to a guy's office, and if you don't give him all your shit, the faction turns angry with you. It's almost like the Cliff's Notes version of Fallout. Somebody was like, okay, here's what happens. You're going to go up there. He's going to tell you what to do, and you have an opportunity to talk your way out of it so you can leave, and they don't try to kill you, or they try to kill you, or you give them all your stuff. You know what I mean? It's shallow. Everything is shallow, and it's really frustrating. You have what was I going to mention? There's another one-off interaction that was ruined. Right. The what was it? The chaos zone. Basically the big fighting arena that you go to where you pick up Kate. I can't remember the name of it at the moment. I think it was like Chaos Zone or something Zone. I don't remember. You go in there and immediately once they see that you're in there, all the raiders attack you. It could be this opportunity to go into a place that's actually overseen by a group of pit fighters or something, and it becomes a whole deal. But instead, you just kill everybody, and then the place is empty for the rest of the time, and you take Kate away. There's no interesting depth of story there. Like you could have said, I like Kate, I want her to come with me, and then the guy says, no deal, she's my best fighter, and then you go, what if I beat her in a fist fight? And then you could buy her that way. But instead you go in, you kill literally everybody that's in the room. It's like 10 or 12 people. It just is, it's a gameplay segment. It's just go in here, hey, kill everybody. There's no story to it. There's no depth. And then you pick up Kate and then you walk around and she'll give you little chunks of her story as you level her up. It's the same with Piper. Piper's got this whole thing going with the mayor of the city, and largely that gets dropped. I think you can pursue it a little bit, but when I went up there to try to talk to him, he said he was very busy and didn't have time to talk to me, and there was no opportunity to start anything. And I just, what am I supposed to do with that? I want the depth of story that I get from New Vegas, not just in the background elements, but in the fact that there are 50 different people to talk to, and they'll tell you different things. For instance, in New Vegas, one of the things that you were often able to do, and this is one of those things that gets absolutely ruined by the new system. I think I already mentioned that with the Minutemen, all you can do is leave, but you can't rat people out or do anything unexpected. What I really, really wanted to do is, in New Vegas, you can find information. All this information goes into sort of a system, right? It goes into what is essentially your video game brain. So you have that guy that's playing bodyguard to the weird, creepy people in New Vegas, the people in the white suits. I can't remember their names either. For the life of me, were they the pillars of the community too? I don't think. Was that them? I don't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They were something like that. They were like the Gentlemen's Club, whatever. Those people, they were pretty interesting, and they had this guy paying to bodyguard some people, and you needed to get in there and kill one of those people for one of your quests. As far as the core storyline was, and the core storyline very much involved you in the politics of the rest of the world. In Fallout 4, the core storyline just involves you in chasing after your stupid kid. You can literally walk out. It's almost as bad as the Fallout 3 storyline, where you literally just run after your dad. If you don't deviate from that at all, the game's over in 45 minutes, pretty much, depending on how fast you can run and if you can avoid super mutants. But it. Combat Zone, that's what it was. Thank you, Chris. Well, shout outs for Chris for reminding me. But I in the worst way, like you said, in the other one, you could get sort of information on this bodyguard guy, and you could give him information, and then he'd fuck off, or he'd help you, or whatever. You know what I mean? You could influence people by getting enough information beforehand, by going and doing things in a different order. You could do stuff that affected gameplay later on, and it gave you tons of options. And if you were super intelligent, you could talk to science people and get through a quest that related to a science person in a different way. And that's one of those things that you really start to feel once you get to the Institute. In the case of the Institute, I just decided arbitrarily that I was going to side with the Institute. So I really wanted to rat out the Patriot. So I did the first chunk of the quest to find out who the Patriot was. And once I had done that, the first thing I did was I ran off to Father, who was your son, spoilers. And I was like, okay, let me talk to him. And I talked to him, and all he wanted to talk about was the current quest I was on. And after that, he wouldn't talk to me at all. I couldn't rat out the Patriot. Now, that's something that you would be able to do. That's something that would have been coded into New Vegas or into one of the earlier games or into Skyrim. And it's one of my favorite things in the world to do. It's one of my favorite parts of a Bethesda game is that I can get this information and then I can use it against somebody. I can do sort of pre-information and find out who killed some guy. And then when I'm at a meeting, instead of having to do a follow-up series of 6 quests, I can just go, no, it was that guy. Look, here, I got this proof. And then they just arrest him right there. They shoot him on the spot, or it turns into a fight or something. And at the very least, that's more interesting than literally the point-to-point linearity that we're given in Fallout 4. That's a gameplay and a story side of things. So you're given these binary choices, at least for the most part, binary choices, and there's no convincing a faction to trust you. And one of the things that I really wanted to do after I realized that I couldn't rat the Patriot out, I was like, okay, I've got an idea, because I like the Railroad. I like what they're doing. I agree with them that synths are people too, and that they should be allowed to do whatever it is that they want. But so what I did was I was like, aha, I'm going to get in good with the Institute. I'm going to become the director of the Institute, but then I'm going to still help the Railroad. And so I went to talk to the people at the Railroad, and that's not an option. When I talked to the lady, she's like, well, here are your choices. Help us get more people out, or kill everybody at the Institute. And I was like, those aren't my only options. You listen to me. I can go in there. I'm going to be named the director, which means I can change all kinds of policies. I can really change how we look at synths from the inside. But for some reason, that's not an option at all. I didn't get it. It was very frustrating, and I should have known after turning in the Patriot wasn't an option that it wouldn't go that way. And I kind of did. I assumed it wasn't going to be an option, but I went there to try to talk to her about it anyway. And then it just went really, really poorly after that because I tried to. Don't worry about it. She had some stuff in her pockets that I needed, and she got mad because I tried to take it. But yeah, I like, for me, I would love to have seen the option to get the Railroad to pretend to disband, right? I'll be like, you guys pretend to disband. Okay, you're going to have to trust me on this one. You guys pretend to disband. I'll say I came here and killed you. You go underground for a while. Meanwhile, I'll become the director of the Institute. My dad's going to die, or my son's going to die in like 2 days, and then I'm going to be in charge, and it's going to be fine. And then you go do that. It's going to be great. You know what I mean? No option for that. No option for even anything like that I ran into throughout the entire game. It was literally the most straightforward Fallout game I've ever played. And it's just terrible. Like, that's why Fallout 1 and 2 and Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3 to an extent were amazing. You have all these options that are based on your character. If my character is supremely intelligent, I can talk to an intelligent person and say, oh yeah, I'll go get that. And one, you need to get a beryllium agitator. And the chick that you're talking to just goes, there's no way you could go on your own. You're never going to know what a beryllium agitator looks like. Stupid. And I'm like, but look at my stats. I stacked intelligence and charisma. What are you even talking about? Of course I'm going to know what it looks like. I'm at 10. Plus 10. I was at like 18 or something ridiculous. Because I kept stacking points in it because I wanted intelligence. But you don't even have the option. She just calls you a moron, and then you tell her, look, I'll just go do it on my own. Thank you very much. There's no option. There's no intelligence conversation option. All of this is driven by the fact that the dialogue wheel gives you 4 options. They picked those 4 options when they wrote the script and forgot to come back and actually pay attention to it. I don't know if they had fewer people working on the game or what, but it's shallow. It's like a kiddie pool. It's terrible. One of the things that really upset me too, and this one's kind of sort of pathetic, but you can't talk to the radio guy. I love the radio guy. The guy on Diamond City Radio. The guy's fan-fucking-tastic. I love that guy. I wanted to go in there and talk to him. You go in there, he just mumbles a couple things. I tried literally 4 times throughout the game at different points in the game to go in there and talk to him about anything. Wouldn't talk to me about anything. The entire time. You literally go in there and fuck around with his equipment. He doesn't say anything. Just sits in his chair. And if you talk to him while you're fucking around with his equipment or after you fuck around with his equipment, he just still keeps being awkward. And he was such a great character, again, that belonged in a better game. The radio guy, Piper, and the chick that plays the main character, who does honestly a pretty decent job, they belong in a better game. It's really, really depressing. The lack of a karma system, I think, is really generally unforgivable. It's the same with visible faction points. Just to touch on that a little bit more before I kind of, get things done. But like the reason that the karma system is a problem, if this is your first Fallout game, you're not going to understand why. The reason that this is such a problem is that if I'm evil, If I do everything that's evil, that goes with me. People react to me based on my karma system, based on my karma points, right? So if I'm a really good guy, they'll be like, hey, it's the hero of Burr. And they'll love you. And if you're evil, then when you walk up to somebody who's generally good, they're going to be kind of shitty with you. So as it was, I could just keep Piper with me and say whatever nice shit she liked until, her puss got wet, and then down came the pants, and there you go. But then when she left and I want to woo Kate, now I just start hitting people up for money and punching people and stealing stuff and picking locks, and you know what I mean? And she'll be impressed by it. So again, nothing that I do has a carryover. If I go into a city, and it's not evil territory, I'm basically neutral with everybody. I don't have a reputation that walks around with me, which is what the karma system gives you. And removing it kills the Fallout experience. It's such a large part of it, along with killing stats and various other things in the 4-button dialogue wheel. These have all destroyed story as Fallout 4 knows it. So they've reduced it to sort of a BioWare game, but failed to realize that, one, BioWare gives you more choices. Two, they carry a karma system as well. And three, it's just not up to scratch. It's not good enough. I mean, I come here for the story. I come here for the depth of the world that's been built by Bethesda in Fallout, and none of it's there. I'd rather play New Vegas, and New Vegas looks terrible. But New Vegas, at the very least, and I don't mind the main character talking, some people bitch about that, but at the very least, New Vegas has the depth that I want. I can play a moron and say moron shit. I can play a super smart person who knows about science or medicine or whatever, and I can have a conversation with characters that's at a higher level than other people who build their character differently are going to be. The way I make my character makes it unique. My sort of weird blend of being kind of an evil dick puts me on the outs with certain people, and then I have to work harder at building a relationship with them, which takes a higher charisma or intelligence stat or something of the sort. And it all works together in this beautiful way that makes a great game. And that's the problem. None of it's there. Everything's been scooped out, and the sort of, quick to market husk of the game has been left in its place. It feels really shallow in just about every way I can think of. It's not bad as a game. It's just disappointing. It's empty. Is devoid of character. It doesn't have the things that make Bethesda games great. It seems to have forgotten that to tack on a couple of bells and whistles and maybe modernize, in big air quotes. Maybe in a year or so when all the DLC is out and the mods are in place, it'll be a good game. But I don't know if it's fixable at this point. Either way, waiting a year is disappointing. New Vegas had a ton of depth at launch. DLC added even more to it and added great, wacky backstories. There were interesting characters all along the way. The closest you get to any of that, really, I guess the characters are okay. Your companions are pretty good, but you can't talk to them in the same way that you used to be able to talk to your companions. And worst beyond all that, and this is saying a lot for a Bethesda game, there's nothing I want to sink my teeth into, and none of the new party pieces are meaningfully integrated. I talked about it a little bit before, but there's not enough depth to the story for me to want to go back and find every single camp and every single little minor person, which is something I did in New Vegas. Building the camps gets you nothing. Modding weapons becomes a chore. You just get the best pieces on the best gun, and that's all it is. The perks themselves are kind of boring and pathetic and really largely just combat centric for the most part, tack-ons that don't really add to the depth of the gameplay. It seems like they remembered that it was a shooting game and forgot about everything else that Fallout games are supposed to have stood for. I guess far and away the conclusion here that I absolutely have to come to is that at best Fallout 4 is half of a Fallout game. Or maybe it's just the husk of a Fallout game wearing nicer clothes. And that's sad. But it is what it is. Hopefully Bethesda will get on it. I doubt it. I don't know what DLC will do, but probably not much. And I'll just be sad and hope that, Elder Scrolls 6 comes along and really blows my skirt up and they remember what their games are supposed to be. Well, we'll have to wait until then to find out. But that's going to be it for me. That's all I got to say about Fallout 4. Hopefully you guys, have some thoughts on it. You can comment, thumbs up if you're watching this after the fact. I'm sure there are plenty of comments in the chat since I live streamed it, but I'm not reading those yet. So thanks for listening to my long rambly review of Fallout 4. Again, it was an okay game. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well if you spent the $60 on it. And hopefully if you haven't spent the $60 on it, you'll wait a little while for the mods and the DLC to get in place, because then I think you'll get a much better value for your money. That's it for me for now, guys. I'm going to do another review here in a couple days, I think, of Telltale's Game of Thrones. But yeah, for right now, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time.